would you be surprised if I said that Mount Gelmir is itself a dungeon? I don't mean the Volcano Manor, I mean Mount Gelmir itself is a dungeon, and the Volcano Manor is a dungeon within a dungeon. Let me explain. The design of Mount Gelmir, I think, is really quite interesting. There's only really two main ways to get in. The first one, what you might call the critical path, is to enter Mount Gelmir via this bridge on the eastern side that runs over the top of this canyon. This will lead you kind of up the main path past these abductor virgins, but there is also a second way to get in. If you were to follow the mine route up onto the Altus Plateau, you might come across this hill and find this point of grace just here on the map. If you don't follow the path down and you instead turn left, you can hop up these rocks and it leads you into this little village. If we skip through all the content here and run around the back behind this raised rock area, we can get into this little river, and following it between the cliffs, it also runs up into Mount Gelmir. Now, this point here, just below Seathwater Cave, let's take stock of this point for a second. So, jumping back to the first area, if we progress along the main path, we quickly get to a point where we can't progress any further. We realize that the bridge is out and we can't go any further, right? So we have to backtrack. And we backtrack about half the distance we've covered to this ladder. Climbing this ladder will allow us to get up onto this cliff kind of area, and then we can progress around to this watchtower. Now, here's one interesting piece of design that I quite liked. There's these stones just here. You're clearly meant to follow this bridge and move across to the other side of this area, over the bridge below you that you previously found was blocked. But there are these little colourful stones that lead off to the left. And if we follow those stones, we get a quick little cutscene where Patches shows up.
You really are that gullible.
And then kicks us down into this area. This is where we were before. If we just jump back up to the top of the hill for a second, we notice that that watchtower has these cliffs that sit around the back of it that kind of guide the player across to this bridge, pushing them towards those rocks. And then those rocks are shiny and kind of stand out, urging the player to follow them. You kind of follow them like a little trail of breadcrumbs, Hansel and Gretel style. And that puts you back down here. If you haven't already progressed back out of this area or explored it, you'll notice that you can follow this river further down. There's a bunch of different places that provide content for this. So there's this little like fort here, and you can roll around the corner. You can cruise across this lava lake, fighting the magma worm. You can then cruise around the back of the mountain, up past this village, onto this rock shaft that runs across where you previously were. And where does that drop you back off? Basically exactly where Patches kicked you off. There's a tomb on your right, or you can progress back down towards that area where the previous little shaft of rock ran across the bridge, which we will do. And now, going across this shaft of bridge, we can climb up these cliffs. Lots of different ways to go, but they all lead to the same place. We move across this bridge. We can go up here. We go past the Falling Star Beast. You can kill it if you want to. We then drop down off this area here into this higher part before we get to the Volcano Manor. And from here, we can pass into the manor, or we can go around underneath the area that passes into the manor. And then we can follow this path back down to this Erd tree where we can fight this ulcerated tree beast, or we can jump back down over the bridge and we can see here the bridge that we previously came to. Now, what's actually interesting about this? Let me draw it on the map for you. Why I'm saying it's a dungeon is because despite this basically seeming like a big open area, it's actually fairly one path, and it's designed very much as a path to follow. So if you come in from this section on the right hand side and you cruise up here to the bridge, we come back. We then go up this ladder and we come around to here. Now, this is our first decision point, but I'm guessing that the idea is that you're supposed to follow the rocks and you drop down here. Now, if you had have come in from the bottom, you would start somewhere like here. You would come up the rocks, we go through here, and then we come down here and we start here. So this is the kind of a point that's very specific. And then what you're supposed to do from here is you follow this around this way, you go down here, we go across the lake, we come around the back of the mountain, we go through the village, jump across here, and then we get back to where we were before. So it's kind of one big long path that's pushing you along around the mountain, around the volcano, and then back to where you started. And then we have to follow this path across here to get up to the Volcano Manor. And so this entire thing is on one specific path. The only path that really branches is if you want to come back down here, across and underneath here, and then fight this tree beast here. And this is super fascinating. I really like how they've designed this part of the game to feel like a big open world, but actually act a lot more like a dungeon. And it's fascinating when you draw that path on there and then compare it to just about any other part of the world. if you take a look at, let's say, Liurnia, there is no single path that you can draw through here. If you were strong enough, maybe you could go straight to the academy, but you'd have to get the gate key first, and then you could cruise down here. But all these different areas are all optional. We look at Limgrave, it's the same thing. We look at Caelid, we look at the Weeping Peninsula, they're all the same thing. Mount Gelmir is very much restricted down to one specific path, like a dungeon. And I think that's really fascinating and a really interesting divergence from the design of almost every other area in the game.